Hey, hi there, how are you? Beautiful nature, so still here. Have you noticed this that when you go into nature, then when you really focus on your surrounding, especially the silence of it, that sometimes your mind can also come to a more silent place? Something that can also happen and will happen when we practice yoga, postures, asanas, and meditation. Or when you maybe notice when you do intense sports, especially when you play games, you know, you surely know this feeling where you play an intense game, whether it's like a sports game, tennis, badminton, um, or even like fun table game or something, anything. Um, when you're really intensely involved, you become super joyful, and oftentimes I think we think it's because of the activity that we're doing we're joyful, and what really is happening, um, what all the great masters are teaching and saying, is that it's not because of that activity, it's just because of that activity we are suddenly able to go beyond the mind and to step out the mind, so to say, or to let the mind come to a moment of stillness, and then it's kind of out of the way and we can touch that internal essence, which they describe as pure joy. So if that is true, and if it's really like, you know, that whenever we're joyful, we're basically just touching something that is already there, and it's really the mind that so often is hindering us from touching it, then the question really becomes, how can we with more intent, more consciously be able to get into that state and to touch that essence more frequently, to be in touch, um, ideally continuously, but for most of us right now this is not possible. But how can we do so more often? And I found one of um, the biggest steps to take, and the biggest kind of realization one needs that helped me most is, first of all, this realization that there is a mind, there's this thought process, but that this is not who we are, and that there's something beneath it which is much vaster and where the joy is. So I don't know how it's for you, but for me, always in a day when I do work and when I'm engaged, suddenly I realize I'm completely lost in my thought process and it's taking over, and it's like, you know, I'm not outside it anymore. I'm just completely entangled and involved, engaged in it. And to have that realization then, to notice that, and to be able then to see it, that I think is one of the most important steps, because the more consciously we are about it when it happens, the more consciously we can be about, going beyond it, getting more often into states where we can move beyond the minds. And there are many tools for this, like indirect tools, like being very engaged in an activity, in sports, and in a game. That's why also Sadhguru always recommends to play games, and he says like when you play a game, you're much closer to your divine nature than when you do anything else. So these are like indirect ways, and then there's direct ways where we try to do it by meditating, by being very closely in touch with our breath, by feeling into the body. Because what happens when we do these things is that we draw away the attention and the energy from our mental process, where most of the day when we are involved in work and stuff, we have most of our attention basically tied up in our mental thought process. And so we are completely like blocked by that when it comes to experiencing our essence and the joy in us. And then to be able to take that attention and energy away and to move it into our body, into our breath, or even into, other sense perceptions. That's why nature can be helpful. These are all very powerful tools to practice this, and then to be more in touch with that source which is beyond the mind. And so I think or I feel that it's very, very important to build that or to break that that identification that we have with the mind. And this is at the essence of yoga, to break that identification. And so what we can do, and what I invite you to do, is to practice frequently throughout the day, to observe how it happens, when it happens, that you're suddenly getting engaged and pulled into that mind stream. And there's collective mind streams, and to practice observing that, and then to consciously move out of it. And you can do that by really just practicing some moments of stillness, being very aware about your breathing, and even feel inside your body. Practices that we do naturally in yoga, you can even bring them into your day-to-day life, and it can be very powerful. And so also, not to get too much into so-called positive thinking, where you try to just think positive, because ultimately that's also not going to help us to move beyond the mind, because it's still happening on the level of the mind. And to have this fundamental differentiation is just so critical. So I invite you to try this, and of course, if you also want to use the tools of yoga and meditation for that, that's very, very powerful to do. There are practices for that that we also teach in our workshops, and I invite you to move into that. So this is it for today. You can see it's getting dark now. The sun is already down for some time. And I see you next week, guys. Have a wonderful day, and give me a thumbs up if you like this video, so it gets more visibility. Share it with some friend, and of course, always leave a comment. Let me know how you are able to to use these practices, and what are the challenges that you're facing. I love to read from you, always. Bye, guys.